Dr. Joanna Winters stared through the observation deck's reinforced window as the Varaxian vessel approached horizon's edge. The alien ship resembled a massive obsidian snowflake, its crystalline surface refracting the light from nearby stars in hypnotic patterns. After 15 years of studying alien languages and communication patterns, she was about to experience humanity's first official contact with an advanced civilization. Their approach vector is exactly as requested, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez reported from his security station. Though I'm still not comfortable with them bringing their diplomatic vessel this close to our research station. Joanna adjusted her uniform collar, smoothing out invisible wrinkles. The Varaxians consider proximity a sign of trust. Maintaining distance would be interpreted as hostile intent. She'd spent months studying the preliminary communication packets they'd exchanged with the aliens, learning their language's subtle nuances and cultural implications. Still doesn't explain why they insisted on coming to us instead of meeting on neutral ground, Marcus muttered, his dark eyes fixed on the approaching vessel. The station's AI chimed in, its calm voice echoing through the observation deck. Varaxian vessel will dock in 15 minutes. All personnel please report to assigned positions. Joanna checked her tablet one last time, reviewing her notes on Varaxian greeting protocols. Their language was fascinating, a complex blend of verbal and electromagnetic signals that their species had evolved to perceive naturally. It had taken human scientists 3 months just to develop an interface that could properly detect and interpret their full range of communication. Station Director Harrison's voice crackled over the comm, Dr. Winters, final check. Are we ready? Yes, Director. Translation systems are online and calibrated. I've prepared responses for 16 different potential greeting scenarios based on their cultural database. She didn't mention the knot in her stomach. Something about the Varaxians' insistence on specific docking protocols had been nagging at her. The massive alien ship's docking clamps engaged with a resonating thud that vibrated through the station's hull. Joanna took her position near the airlock, tablet ready. Her heart raced as the pressure equalization sequence began. The inner door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing 3 Varaxians. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Multiple compound eyes arranged in a circular pattern around their elongated heads took in everything at once. Joanna stepped forward, raising her hand in the greeting gesture they'd studied from the Varaxian databases. In peace and pursuit of knowledge, we welcome you to Horizon's Edge, she said, the translation device at her throat converting her words into the complex electromagnetic patterns of Varaxian speech. The lead alien scales rippled with dark patterns. Something was wrong. The response wasn't matching any of the expected protocols. Your primitive attempts at our language are amusing, the alien's translated voice came through her earpiece, dripping with contempt. Though I suppose we should commend you for achieving even this much understanding. Joanna's blood ran cold. This wasn't the diplomatic language they'd been using in their communications. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Multiple hull breaches detected, the station's AI announced. Unknown entities boarding through emergency airlocks. Security protocols compromised. The lead Varaxian scales now pulsed with patterns that hadn't been in any of their linguistic databases, patterns that spoke of predatory satisfaction. Your species' rapid technological advancement caught our attention, Dr. Winters. Too rapid. An uncontrolled element in our carefully ordered galaxy. Security teams rushed into the docking area, weapons raised, but they were already too late. Strange energy fields emanated from the Varaxian scales, and every human in the room except Joanna collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. Why? She managed to ask, backing away as more Varaxians poured through the airlock. Your kind represents chaos. Unpredictability. You achieve in decades what should take centuries. This station's research into quantum communications risks destabilizing the established order. The alien moved closer, its electromagnetic emissions making her translation device crackle. But you, Dr. Winters, you might prove useful. Your understanding of communication could serve our empire. Joanna glanced at her fallen colleagues, at Marcus struggling to reach his weapon. This wasn't just about Horizon's Edge. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy. I'd rather die, she spat, slapping the emergency panel beside her. Blast doors slammed down, separating her from the aliens. She ran, her mind already racing through everything she knew about the station's systems. The Varaxians thought humans were primitive. She was about to show them just how dangerous primitive could be. Her footsteps echoed through the corridors as she ran toward the maintenance sections. Behind her, she could hear the aliens cutting through the blast doors. They might have superior technology, but they'd made one crucial mistake: they'd attacked a human research station without understanding how humans think. And Joanna Winters, the woman who'd learned to read their language better than they'd expected, was about to become their worst nightmare. The maintenance tunnels of Horizon's Edge were a maze of pipes, conduits, and access panels, a cramped labyrinth that Joanna had never expected to navigate. Yet here she was, wedged between a coolant line and a data trunk, listening to the methodical sounds of Varaxian search parties above. Her tablet, now modified to run in silent mode, displayed the station's internal sensor feeds. The aliens had taken control of the main systems, but they hadn't found the isolated emergency network yet. Amateur mistake. The Varaxians were so confident in their technological superiority that they hadn't bothered to check for backup systems. Section 7 clear, a translated voice echoed through the ventilation system. No sign of the human linguist. Joanna allowed herself a grim smile. They were looking for a communications expert, someone who understood their language. They weren't looking for someone who'd spent the last 6 months studying every technical manual on the station while trying to understand alien technology integration protocols. She pulled up the station's maintenance logs on her tablet. Director Harrison had always insisted that every crew member understand basic station operations. Redundancy saves lives, had been his motto. Now, those mandatory technical briefings were about to pay off. The Varaxians had imprisoned the station's crew in the main habitat ring, using their own environmental controls to keep them subdued. But they'd left the maintenance systems running on automatic, probably assuming they were too primitive to be a threat. Let's test that theory, Joanna whispered, connecting her tablet to a maintenance interface. Her fingers flew across the screen, implementing the first phase of her plan. The station's systems were like a language, complex, interconnected, full of subtle meanings. And just like a language, if you understood the underlying rules, you could make it say exactly what you wanted. First, she accessed the environmental control subsystems. Not the main controls the Varaxians were watching, but the emergency backup units designed to activate during catastrophic failures. With a few careful commands, she began introducing subtle changes to the atmosphere composition in non-critical areas. The effects wouldn't be immediate or obvious. Just a slightly higher concentration of carbon dioxide here, a minor temperature fluctuation there. Nothing that would trigger alarms, but enough to make the aliens increasingly uncomfortable without knowing why. Her tablet beeped softly. Someone was accessing the quantum communication array. The Varaxians were trying to contact their homeworld. Joanna quickly patched into the feed, her translation software decoding their transmission. Primary objective achieved. Research station secured. Human advancement contained. Awaiting further instructions regarding prisoner processing. Joanna's hands clenched. They weren't just here to stop human progress, they planned to extract everything they could from the crew first. Well, they were about to learn why humans had advanced so quickly, were really good at turning other people's weapons against them. She began her next move, targeting the station's internal communication system. The Varaxians were using their own encrypted channels, but they still relied on the station's basic infrastructure to transmit signals. Time to introduce some technical difficulties. Working quickly, she wrote a simple program that would introduce random delays into their communications, nothing major, just enough to create confusion and doubt. A message that took 2 seconds longer to arrive here, a response delayed by 3 seconds there. In combat situations, those tiny delays could mean the difference between coordination and chaos. A sudden commotion above made her freeze. Through the ventilation system, she could hear the aliens discovering her first trap. Environmental anomalies detected in Section 12, one reported. Atmospheric composition showing unexpected variations. Impossible, another responded, its translated voice carrying traces of irritation. These systems are too primitive to malfunction in this way. Running diagnostic protocols. Joanna smiled. They'd waste hours running diagnostics, finding nothing wrong because technically, everything was working exactly as it should. They'd never consider that someone was using their own assumptions about human technology against them. She moved through the maintenance tunnel, heading for her next target. The station's primary computer core was too well guarded, but there were other ways to cause havoc. Each section of the station had its own semi-autonomous control systems, a design feature implemented after a cascade failure had nearly destroyed humanity's first space station. Reaching a junction, she pulled up the station's power distribution schematics. The Varaxians had brought their own power systems, tying them into the station's grid. They probably thought it was a simple process, just converting their advanced energy sources to work with primitive human technology. They didn't realize that human engineering always included fail-safes within fail-safes. Director Harrison had called it paranoid redundancy. Every power connection had multiple backups, each with its own isolated control system. And Joanna was about to use that complexity to her advantage. She began implementing subtle power fluctuations throughout the station. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create ghost readings in their sensors, make lights flicker occasionally, cause doors to respond a fraction of a second slower than they should. The kind of problems that would drive engineers crazy trying to track down. Her tablet suddenly lit up with alert notifications. The Varaxians were starting to notice the communication delays. Their messages were becoming increasingly frustrated as coordination between their teams deteriorated. "This is Squad Leader Vex," one message read, delayed by precisely 2.3 seconds. "Team 2 not responding to coordinates. Possible human resistance." "Negative," came the response, delayed by 3.1 seconds. "Internal sensors show no human movement. Must be system interference." Joanna checked her watch. 6 hours since the takeover began. 6 hours of careful, methodical sabotage. The Varaxians didn't realize it yet, but their perfect operation was already beginning to unravel. Their own arrogance would be their downfall. They were so convinced of their superiority that they couldn't imagine a primitive human turning their own systems against them. She pulled up the station's maintenance schedule. In exactly 2 hours, the automated system would begin its daily diagnostic cycle. Usually, it was a routine process that no one even noticed. But today, with all her careful preparations in place, it was going to trigger a cascade of carefully orchestrated malfunctions that would throw the entire station into chaos. The Varaxians thought they were dealing with a simple linguist. They were about to learn that understanding languages isn't just about communication, it's about understanding systems, patterns, and most importantly, how to break them. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the maintenance tunnels as Joanna made her way to the station's auxiliary control center. Her carefully orchestrated chaos was working better than expected. The Varaxians were running themselves ragged trying to track down phantom malfunctions, but she knew they'd eventually start looking deeper into the station's systems. Time to implement Phase 3. The auxiliary control center was a backup bridge, hidden behind 3 layers of reinforced bulkheads. It was designed as a last resort during catastrophic emergencies, exactly the kind of human paranoia the Varaxians had dismissed as primitive thinking. "Station, recognize voice pattern, Dr. Joanna Winters," she whispered into the control panel. Voice pattern recognized, the station's AI responded quietly. "Warning, primary systems compromised. Running on auxiliary power. I know. Joanna connected her tablet to the main console. Station, initiate Protocol Echo 7. Protocol Echo 7 requires command authorization. Authorization code, Winter Shadow 97 Delta. The screens around her flickered to life, displaying the station's core systems. Echo 7 was a deep recovery protocol that Director Harrison had insisted on implementing, a way to regain control of the station even if every primary system was compromised. Station, begin selective system isolation. Priority, life support, internal sensors, and communication networks. Warning, selective isolation will alert current system administrators. Joanna smiled grimly. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Execute. Throughout the station, systems began disconnecting from the main network, switching to isolated backup controls. To the Varaxians, it would look like random system failures, frustrating, but not immediately threatening. Her tablet chimed with intercepted communications. The aliens were growing increasingly agitated. Command, engineering team reports critical failures in multiple sectors, one message read. Unable to maintain stable control over station systems. Impossible, came the delayed response. These primitives barely understand quantum mechanics. Their technology cannot be causing these issues. Joanna accessed the station's internal sensors, watching the Varaxians scramble between control panels. Their scales flickered with patterns of frustration and confusion. They still couldn't accept that their superior technology was being undermined by simple human ingenuity. She began the next phase of her plan, targeting the station's environmental systems. The Varaxians had modified the atmosphere in the habitat ring to keep the human crew sedated. Now, she would use their own modifications against them. Station, analyze current atmospheric composition in habitat ring. Analysis complete. Detecting unknown chemical compounds consistent with Varaxian control protocols. Perfect. Begin gradual filtration through emergency scrubbers. Duration, 2 hours. Maintain sedative effect but reduce concentration by 60%. The AI acknowledged her commands. Slowly, the station would start cleaning the air, giving the imprisoned crew a chance to regain consciousness without alerting their captors. A sudden alarm made her freeze. On her screens, she saw a team of Varaxians approaching the maintenance section where she'd hidden earlier. They're learning, she muttered. Time to give them something else to worry about. Station, initiate maintenance protocol Delta 9 in sections 3 through 7. The effect was immediate. Emergency bulkheads slammed down throughout those sections, trapping the search teams. Atmosphere pressure began fluctuating randomly, and gravity plating cycled between 0.8 and 1.2 standard gravity. Let's see how they handle a little spatial disorientation. Her tablet displayed new messages as the Varaxians tried to coordinate their response. Their communications were becoming increasingly chaotic, filled with contradictory orders and confused reports. Command, unable to maintain position. Station systems not responding to override attempts. All teams, fall back to secure sections. Engineering, locate source of system failures. Negative, engineering team locked down in section 5. Experiencing severe gravitational fluctuations. Joanna allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before moving to her next target. The Varaxians had connected their quantum communication array to the station's power grid. They thought they were just drawing power, but they'd actually given her a backdoor into their systems. Station, analyze power consumption patterns from external quantum array. Analysis complete. Detecting cyclical power surges consistent with encrypted communication protocols. Good. Begin introducing random power fluctuations. Match them to their transmission frequencies. It was a risky move. If the Varaxians detected the pattern, they might realize someone was actively manipulating the station's systems. But if it worked, their supposedly secure communications would become increasingly unreliable. The screens showed her plan taking effect. The aliens' messages were becoming garbled, filled with static and incomplete transmissions. Their carefully coordinated operation was dissolving into confusion and paranoia. A new alert caught her attention. The Varaxians were attempting to access the station's core programming, trying to regain control of the rebellious systems. "They're finally starting to take us seriously," Joanna murmured. "Station, prepare to execute Protocol Omega-6 on my mark. Warning, Protocol Omega-6 will result in complete system reconfiguration. Recovery time estimated at 6 hours. Acknowledged. Stand by." She watched the aliens' increasing desperation with grim satisfaction. They'd come here expecting to find primitive humans playing with technology they barely understood. Instead, they'd found themselves trapped in a maze of their own making, fighting against systems they couldn't control. The station's AI spoke again, its voice carrying a note of urgency. "Dr. Winters, detecting multiple attempts to breach core programming. Varaxian algorithms attempting to override safety protocols." "Let them try," Joanna replied, her fingers flying over the console. "They don't understand human programming. We don't think in straight lines and perfect patterns. We build redundancies, backdoors, and fail-safes into everything we create." She was no longer just hiding or sabotaging. Now, she was preparing for a direct confrontation. The Varaxians wanted to see what human technology was capable of. She was about to show them exactly why humanity had advanced so quickly. Because sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't the most advanced, it's the one your enemy underestimates. The Varaxian High Commander's scales rippled with patterns of rage as another system crashed around him. What had started as a perfectly executed takeover was now descending into chaos. Their supposedly inferior human prisoners were still sedated in the habitat ring, yet somehow their primitive station was fighting back. "Report," he demanded, his electromagnetic emissions making the translated voice crackle with interference. "High Commander," his chief engineer's scales flickered with distress patterns, "we've lost control of 60% of the station's systems. Our attempts to override their protocols trigger more failures. It's as if the station itself is rejecting our presence." Meanwhile, in the Auxiliary Control Center, Joanna watched their frustration with grim satisfaction. The Varaxians had finally realized they were under attack, but they were looking for the wrong kind of enemy. They expected direct confrontation, not the subtle manipulation of systems they dismissed as primitive. "Station," she commanded, "initiate Phase 4. Acknowledged. Beginning systematic power redistribution." Throughout Horizon's edge, lights began flickering in complex patterns. Temperature controls fluctuated randomly. Gravity plating cycled between different intensities in seemingly random sequences. To the Varaxians, it looked like cascading system failures. Only Joanna knew these were carefully orchestrated changes, designed to push the aliens exactly where she wanted them. Her tablet intercepted another burst of their communications. "High Command, Engineering Team 7 has gone silent. Last report indicated strange readings from their neural interfaces." "Impossible," the High Commander's response crackled through. "Their technology cannot interfere with our neural systems." Joanna smiled. They still didn't understand. She wasn't trying to interfere with their neural interfaces, she was using the station's electromagnetic fields to create interference patterns that matched their own communication frequencies. The resulting feedback was playing havoc with their supposedly superior technology. "Station, analyze Varaxian movement patterns." The AI displayed a map showing the aliens' positions. They were clustering in defensive formations, abandoning the outer sections of the station as more systems failed. "Exactly as planned. Prepare for final protocol execution," she ordered, fingers dancing across the console. "Initiate electromagnetic pulse sequence in abandoned sections." The station acknowledged her command. In the sections the Varaxians had retreated from, carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulses began cycling through the power systems. Each pulse was tuned to a specific frequency, frequencies she'd identified from studying their communications. Her tablet lit up with new alerts. The Varaxians were detecting the pulses, but not understanding their true purpose. To them, it looked like their own systems were starting to malfunction. "High Commander," another message scrolled across her screen, "our quantum interface arrays are showing signs of degradation. Unable to maintain stable connection with Fleet Command. Find the source." The High Commander's response was immediate. "This primitive station cannot be capable of disrupting our technology." But it was. Every system failure, every malfunction, every random occurrence was part of Joanna's carefully orchestrated plan. She wasn't just fighting the Varaxians, she was using their own prejudices against them. "Station, begin atmospheric reconfiguration in habitat ring. Neutralize remaining sedative compounds." As the station's life support systems began cleaning the air, Joanna watched the crew's life signs on her monitors. They were starting to show increased brain activity. Soon, they would begin regaining consciousness. A new alert flashed on her screen. The Varaxians had detected the change in atmospheric composition and were trying to compensate. But their attempts to reintroduce their sedative compounds were met with more system failures. "Warning," the station's AI announced, detecting multiple breach attempts in primary computer core. "Let them try," Joanna muttered. "Execute Protocol Omega-6." Throughout the station, every system suddenly went dark. For 3 long seconds, Horizon's edge was completely silent. Then, one by one, systems began rebooting, but not into their normal configurations. The Varaxians had thought they were dealing with primitive technology, something they could easily override and control. They never considered that humans might build systems specifically designed to be unpredictable, to operate in ways that defied conventional logic. Emergency lighting cast red shadows through the corridors as Joanna watched the aliens' confusion turn to panic. Their neural interfaces were being bombarded with conflicting signals. Their quantum communications were degrading faster than they could compensate. Even their own technology was beginning to turn against them. "High Commander," the last intercepted message scrolled across her screen, "we are losing control. The station, it's not just malfunctioning. It's adapting." In the darkness of the auxiliary control center, Joanna allowed herself a cold smile. "They finally understand," she whispered. "We're not primitive. We're something much more dangerous, we're innovative." The station systems continued their carefully programmed dance of chaos and control. In the habitat ring, the human crew was awakening. And throughout Horizon's Edge, the Varaxians were about to learn the true cost of underestimating humanity. Because sometimes, the most primitive solution is the most effective, especially when wielded by someone willing to rewrite the rules of engagement. The High Commander's command center had devolved into chaos. Holographic displays flickered with conflicting data as his officers fought to regain control of a station that seemed to have developed a mind of its own. Their scales shifted through patterns of confusion and fear, emotions they hadn't felt in centuries of technological supremacy. "All teams, fall back to Central Command," he ordered, his translator struggling to maintain coherent output through the electromagnetic interference. "Prepare for emergency evacuation." But Joanna had been waiting for this moment. As the Varaxians began their retreat, she initiated her final protocol. "Station, execute Priority Override Alpha. Authorization, Winter's Final Strike." Throughout Horizon's Edge, emergency bulkheads slammed down, isolating different sections of the station. The Varaxians found themselves separated, their carefully organized units scattered and cut off from each other. In the habitat ring, the last of the sedative compounds were being purged from the atmosphere. Lieutenant Rodriguez was the first to regain consciousness, followed quickly by Director Harrison and the rest of the security team. Joanna watched through the station's cameras as they quickly assessed their situation and began arming themselves with emergency weapons. "Station, open communication channel to all sections," she commanded. "Channel open, Dr. Winters." Her voice echoed through every corridor and chamber of Horizon's Edge. "Attention Varaxian forces. You came to this station believing you would find primitive technology and an inferior species. You thought our rapid advancement must mean we had help, that we couldn't possibly have developed our technology legitimately." In the command center, the High Commander's scales flared with recognition. "The linguist. Find her." "But you made a crucial mistake," Joanna continued. "You judged our technology by its apparent simplicity. You never stopped to ask why we would design systems the way we did. You never considered that what looked like primitive redundancies might be intentional failsafes. You never questioned why a species that advanced so quickly would build things to appear so basic." Throughout the station, the awakened human crew was moving with practiced efficiency, securing sections and rounding up isolated Varaxian forces. The alien superior technology was useless against systems they couldn't understand or control. "You see," Joanna's voice carried a hint of satisfaction, "humans don't advance in straight lines. We don't build perfect, elegant solutions. We create redundant, overcomplicated systems because we expect things to go wrong. We plan for failure. We design for chaos." In a desperate move, the High Commander activated his quantum communicator, trying to reach their ship. But Joanna had been ready for this too. The carefully tuned electromagnetic pulses she'd been building up created a feedback loop in their quantum systems, turning their own communication attempts into weapons against them. "Your neural interfaces are failing because we designed our power systems to generate random electromagnetic fields that just happen to match your communication frequencies. Your quantum systems are collapsing because we built our primitive power grid to resonate at exactly the right frequencies to disrupt them." Security teams led by Rodriguez had reached the command center. The Varaxians found their advanced weapons systems unresponsive, their neural enhancements overwhelmed by the station's electromagnetic chaos. "Consider this a lesson in human nature," Joanna continued, making her way from the auxiliary control center to join her crew. "We advance quickly not because we're copying others, but because we learn from everything, including our failures. Especially our failures." The High Commander's scales had gone almost black with rage as human security forces entered his command center. "Impossible. You are primitive, you cannot." "We just did," Joanna said, stepping through the doorway. Her tablet displayed the station's systems, all running exactly as she'd programmed them. "Your mistake wasn't attacking us. Your mistake was assuming that because we're young, we're naive. That because our technology looks simple, it is simple." Director Harrison approached her, looking battered but alert. "Dr. Winters, the station is secure. All Varaxian forces have been contained. Signal the Earth Defense Fleet," she ordered. "Tell them Horizon's Edge is under human control again." The High Commander's translator crackled as he spoke, "You cannot think this ends here. The Varaxian Empire will not." "Will not what?" Joanna interrupted. "Attack us openly. That would mean admitting you were defeated by primitive humans. That your superior technology was overcome by what you thought was an inferior species." She smiled coldly. "No, I don't think you'll be telling anyone about this." She turned to address all the captured Varaxians. "Instead, you're going to take a message back to your empire. Humanity isn't just another species for you to dominate. We're not bound by your rules or your expectations. We advance quickly because we're not afraid to think differently, to build things differently, to fight differently." The station's systems had stabilized, now running smoothly under human control again. Outside, the first Earth Defense Fleet ships were appearing, responding to their emergency signal. "Remember this day," Joanna concluded. "Remember how a primitive human turned your own assumptions against you. Remember that we're not just surviving in this galaxy, we're thriving. And the next time you think about interfering with human advancement, remember Horizon's Edge." As Earth forces began securing the station and detaining the Varaxian prisoners, Joanna looked out at the stars through the observation deck. The Varaxians had come expecting to find an easy target, a young species playing with technology they didn't understand. Instead, they'd learned a valuable lesson about humanity. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't the most advanced technology, but the creativity to use what you have in ways your enemy never expects.